Brothers and sisters, I would like to introduce you to one of our speakers that will give us talk number 3 to what it meant to be a Christian. She's been in CFC for 15 years, married to Maripe. They have 2 kids named John and Josh. He's a former household leader, a former unit leader, a former chapter leader in the South. Brother and sister, Brother Fernando Silva.
Thank you, Brother Eric. Thank you. Good evening once again, brothers and sisters, to all the participants. We welcome you and congratulations. This is your 3rd session, I believe, right? You had the orientation. The first session was the orientation, and then you had the talks last week, and this is your 3rd session. And I just hope and pray that you continue to open your hearts, right? Open your mind, and to see. The basic truths about Christianity, which we're having now. And I know you're friends with a lot of members, those who invited you to join, at least this series of talks, right? So I'm going to proceed to my talk without much further ado. And I'm going to share my screen. Here. Okay, brothers and sisters, as I mentioned, this is talk number 3. And the topic is, what does it mean to be a Christian, right? And last week, you listened to a talk number 2. I believe Brother Jonet Tumulak gave that talk, right? And the title of the talk is, Who is Jesus Christ? And I remember when I had my first, when I first joined, when I first attended this series of talks, one of the things that I remember that comes to mind is the impact of Jesus Christ in history, that we measure history between, before Christ and after Christ. And that struck me as something like, I just like took that for granted. I never really thought about it, right? But if there is one thing, the most important thing that we should have picked up from last week, right? Like, who is Jesus Christ, right? What is the most important thing? Jesus is God, right? He's not just a prophet or a wise man or somebody you admire or somebody you looked up to, somebody who's knowledgeable. No, he is God. He is our Lord and Savior. And as Christians, we carry his name. You can see in the slide here, right? Christ is in the word Christian, right? So what does it mean to be a Christian? Like if I ask you, you probably, if I ask you, what does it mean to be a Christian? You probably take like a few moments to think, because we just take that for granted, like we're Catholics, we're Christians. We never really given it much thought, right? You may say, oh, Christian is somebody who's holy, who prays a lot, who goes to mass. Yeah, you are correct in a lot of ways, right? But those are incomplete notions of what it means to be a Christian, right? You're like looking at one part of a whole and takes it for the whole thing, right? So it's actually an incomplete notion of what it is to be a Christian. What we're going to do, first part of this, in the early part of the talk, is let's just go to some of these misconceptions and incomplete notions, which a lot of people have, and maybe some of you may have. I know very few probably would have it in this audience, but let's just look at some of them. First of all, one is Christianity is reduced to a mere religious system, right? A set of doctrines to believe in, like the Apostles' Creed. So if you know the Apostles' Creed, all of the prayers, you know the litanies by heart, you don't have to read them, you can recite them, by heart. Does that automatically make you a Christian? A set of religious practices. We have a lot of religious practices, Catholics, Christians, we have a lot of them, especially Filipinos. First of all, we have the sacraments like the Mass, the baptism, but we also have novenas, we have black rosaries in the Philippines, we have religious processions. During Holy Week, we have the pabasa, we have fiestas in the Philippines, right? So if we participate in all of those religious practices, does that automatically makes us Christians? Knowing or reading a lot about God. If you know the Bible by heart, you know the verses, you can quote them, you can just say, oh, that's from Isaiah, that's from letter of St. Paul to the Hebrews. If you know the Bible by heart, right? Does that automatically make you a Christian? Remember, the devil can also quote the scriptures. Doing a lot for God. Yes, my brothers and sisters, all of these things are good, but they don't necessarily make you a Christian by themselves, right? They are misconceptions or incomplete notions of what it is to be a Christian. Another one is Christianity is a mere moral system, right? A set of do's and don'ts, a set of rules regarding right and wrong, avoiding those things that can make you go to hell. If we just follow a set of do's and don'ts, we'll be just like robots, right? Like right, left, up, down, right, wrong, right? We'll be like robots because we're just following like a set of rules. And if we just avoid those things that can make us go to hell, right? What they say is, if you don't want to make mistake, don't do anything. So if you don't want to go to hell, can you just like sit there like a rock and don't do anything because, you don't want to do anything wrong, right? But that doesn't make you a Christian. These are incomplete notions because they make religion legalistic and sterile, right? There is no joy, there is no life in them. We'll be just like robots if we follow these simple rules, right? Without even taking it to heart. Another one is Christianity is a social humanitarian system. Christianity has many social dimensions. Mass itself is a social event, right? We have group prayers, conferences, the breaking of bread when we share a meal with each other, the communion with each other. That's a social event, right? And then we have we have a lot of social justice programs, and we have Caritas International, we have Catholic Relief Services, we do work for the poor, we volunteer for soup kitchens, soup pantries, and all of those food pantries. But it is not really correct to simply equate Christianity with humanitarianism, right? And then there's another misconception is Christian is someone who does good and is kind. He is a nice man or woman who always smiles, is friendly, never gets angry. Do you know anybody like that? And tries to please everyone? That, again, is an incomplete notion because it leaves out the deity of Christ and limits Christianity to merely a being good Samaritan, right? Let's just take, the current times, the modern times now. We have a lot of movements nowadays, right? Beautiful sentiments, noble sentiments, uplifting the individual, like woman power, black power, brown power, white power, They're very beautiful sentiments, noble sentiments. But if you notice, in a lot of them, right, God is absent. Per se, they're not bad. They do a lot of good things, and the sentiments are really admirable. But God is not part of those movements. One more thing is that Christianity is an escape from the realities of life, an opium of the poor and the oppressed. It is for the weak, for those who cannot cope with life. I remember historically, the communism, I think when I was in high school, they said like the communism, they say like, oh, religion is for the masses so that they don't rise up, so they'll be gonna be content with the condition that they're in, even though they're in poverty or they don't have freedom. But that is not true, right? That is a wrong notion because Christians are not taught to escape problems, but actually to face them, right? As I mentioned, we have a lot of social justice programs. We stand for the truth. We stand for justice. Those of you of a certain age, if you remember the EDSA revolution, right? The Catholic Church stood shoulder to shoulder with all of those who were rising up against the injustice of the government at that time. So it is not true, right, that we are taught to escape problems. So what is Christianity then? Are we like back to square one? You know, we went through a lot of this. I mentioned a few examples, but we're saying those are not, that those by themselves do not define Christianity. No, we're not really back to square one. Because now we realize that with those examples that I gave, right, there was something missing in them, right? You can say they're missing a soul, heart, an anchor that says, you are a Christian. So what are these things then, that these things that would actually define and characterize somebody as a Christian? First, a Christian is a person of faith. In Hebrews 11:1, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. The assurance of things hoped for, right? And the conviction of things not seen. You know, what makes us Christians is our loving personal relationship with God. Our whole life becomes an expression of this relationship. And everything else that we do, you know, those misconceptions that I went through earlier, merely expresses this relationship. But what is faith? Let us take a closer look at what is faith. And let us start with like a high level, the obvious, you know, the surface. The profession of faith, right? We recite that during Mass, right? And a lot of times when we recite that, sometimes we do it, you know, mechanically, you know, sometimes absent-mindedly, right? You know, we're reciting, I believe in God, but our minds are like, we're thinking about what we're going to have for lunch, or, you know, there's something going on at work, you know, there's something you have to do. Sometimes it enters our minds and we're not really into the words that we're saying, right? Now, there's a Catholic priest. He's a retired priest from St. Cecilia Church in Monmouth Junction. Sometimes he goes to our parish in Principe of Mary, you know, when our pastor is not available, when the priest is not available. But when we recite the profession of faith, instead of saying, let us recite the profession of faith, he actually asks a question like, what do you believe? And then, of course, we answer, I believe in God, the Father Almighty. We go to all of those things. But then it's not like, since he asked that question, you know, like kind of like wakes you up, right? You say it less mechanically, right? Because you're in the moment, because he asked you directly. And our former pastor, Monsignor Robert Medley, during the Easter Vigil, when he inducts the catechumens, he asked each of them, as the community, the whole congregation is listening, but he's addressing the catechumens. And he said, do you believe in God, the Father Almighty? And then for all of these lines, right, the catechumens will answer, yes, yes, yes. And then at the end, Father Bob would say, this is our faith. This is the faith of the church. But what is faith exactly, right? Faith is a gift from God. You know, Pope Benedict said, it is the result of God's initiative toward man. It is not simply a choice that men make for themselves. Faith comes about because men are touched deep within by God's Spirit, who opens and purifies their hearts. So it is an initiative from God, right? It's a gift. It doesn't come from us. It's got to come from God. And then it is not simply a choice where we say, today I resolve I'm going to have faith. Or I think, I feel that I'm going to have faith today. No, it is not a simple choice that we have, right? It comes to us when God's Spirit steers our hearts and opens our hearts and our minds. But how does God come to us? God comes to us in silence. In Psalm 46, it is written, "Be still and know that I am God." He comes to us in silence. Sometimes in the silent prayer time, right? So I read to you Hebrew 11:1, right? It says, let me repeat that. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. A French writer, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, I don't know if you know him, he wrote The Little Prince. Some of you may know that work, right? He said, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." I'm going to repeat that. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. We talk about the profession of faith, right? There was a song many decades ago. Some of you, of a certain age, maybe you're kind of familiar with it, or maybe you've heard it, parents, some of you are younger, right? The song, I believe, I believe for every drop of rain that falls. In a way, some of those lines in there are sort of a profession of faith, right? Let me just go to you a couple of lines there. I believe that somewhere in the darkest night, the candle glows. Somewhere in that darkest night, so dark that there is no light at all. It's pitch black. But you believe that in that darkest night, a candle glows. That is faith. There's another line. I believe above the storm, the smallest prayer would still be heard. So we have a thunderstorm, right? Thunder and lightning, loud sound crashing here and there, right? But you believe that above that storm, the smallest prayer of a child, of a mother, would still be heard. That is faith. William Blake, a poet, and he wrote like 4 lines from Auguries of Innocence. And I love these lines, and I thought maybe I'll share it with you as we're talking about faith, right? That faith is something that we don't see with our eyes, but with our heart. William Blake said in Auguries of Innocence, "To see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palms of your hand and eternity in an hour." I'm going to read that again, and as I read it, like see it, not with our mortal eyes, but with our heart. To see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palms of your hand and eternity in an hour. There was a man who didn't have any faith, but he wants to believe, he wants to have faith. He doesn't realize that faith is a gift. It's not something that you just want, right? It's a gift, and it comes to us when God's Spirit comes to us, touches us, and steers our hearts and our being. But this man, he just wants to have faith. He wants to see a sign from God, like show me a sign, right? So he went out, and then he looked at an open field, and said, he whispered actually. The man whispered, God, speak to me. And a bird, a meadowlark sang, but the man did not hear. So the man yelled, because he's desperate, like he yelled, God, speak to me. And thunder and lightning rolled across the sky, but the man did not listen. Then the man looked around and said, God, let me see you. And stars shone in a beautiful, clear, crisp night sky, but the man did not see. So the man shouted, God, show me a miracle. And the life was born, but the man did not notice. So in his desperation, right, almost at the top of his voice, he cried out in despair, touch me, God, and let me know you are here. He's so desperate. Whereupon, God reached down and touched the man on his shoulder. But the man brushed the butterfly away and walked on. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Secondly, a Christian is a person of hope, right? In Romans chapter 8, verses 24 to 25, it is written, for in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is sin is not hope, for who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it in patience. Now, as you can see that, hope and faith, they kind of tie together. They have to go together because you cannot have hope if you do not have faith. Because what are you hoping for if you do not believe anyway? So I'm just going to cite one example here of a story which is held up as a model of what it is to have hope and faith in God. In 2 Maccabees chapter 7, there's a story of a widow with 7 sons and a priest who were tortured slowly, one by one, until they died, rather than denounce God. They only have to denounce God, right? They only have to denounce him, and they would be killed, but a quick, almost painless death. It's going to be a quick death, right? But no, they did not deny God, right? At one point, the tyrant even told the mother, just tell you, after maybe I think 3 of the sons were already killed slowly, like horrible death, may approach one son. Just tell him, just denounce God and, he'll die quickly. But so the mother went to the son, but instead of telling the son to just denounce God, she said words to the effect of, I carried you in my loins. Remember that we have a God. Don't obey this tyrant, and words to that effect, right? We don't have the time to go into this, but when maybe your homework when you have the time, 2 Maccabees chapter 7, the story of the Maccabean martyrs is held up really as a model of hope and faith in God. So now we have faith and hope. So what do you think is next? Some of you probably would have guessed what the next one is. A Christian is a person of love. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, hold on a second, I forgot to bring it up. I'm going to read to you what St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the first 3 verses of that. Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot to, to open the Bible earlier. So I'm going to read to you. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. I don't even have faith, right? To move the glass of water next to me. But if I have faith that can move that and move mountains, but if I don't have love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. So if I do mission, if I do evangelization, I go to the mountains to go after those people who do not know God, and I offer everything I have. I donate everything I have. I work for charity, right? But if I do not have love, I don't achieve anything. Faith, hope, and love abide. These three. But the greatest of these is love. And the Blessed Virgin Mary is actually the perfect example of of someone having these virtues of faith, hope, and love. Now, how many of you know the song Ubi Caritas, right? This is a 9th century hymn that we sing in church. Ubi Caritas es vera, Deus EBS, Deus. You're probably familiar with it, What does it mean? This is in Latin, right? Ubi Caritas es vera, where there is love, that is true, Deus EBS, God is there. Where there is love that is true, God is there. Sometimes we just say, where there is love, God is there. Now, when do we sing this in church? When do we sing this? We sing it many times during the year, many, many times. But there is one day that we always sing this song. In the Principle of Mary Church, because I know they're going to sing it on this day, right? I actually wait. Maybe this year they're not going to sing it. No, but it never fails. They sing this song on that day. You know which day that is? Holy Thursday, during the Mass of the Lord's Supper. When we go to Mass on Holy Thursday, that's the Mass of the Lord's Supper. Now, there is one ritual there, that we're familiar with, right? The ritual of the washing of the feet. And you all know the story about this, right? In this ritual, Jesus showed an example of how it is to love one another, figuratively, right? Not literally, right? And after that, he says, words to the effect of, go and do likewise. He did not say, if you have the time, or if you are not inconvenienced, or if you are not grossed out by such an act. No, he said, go and do likewise. Now, Holy Thursday. What's another name for Holy Thursday? Do you know? Have you ever heard of Maundy Thursday? Why do we call Holy Thursday Maundy Thursday? What does Maundy mean? If you look it up in the dictionary, it's gonna say, like it's a ceremony of washing of the feet on Maundy Thursday, or the alms distributed on Maundy Thursday. So that doesn't really help you. What is the meaning of Maundy? It actually from the Latin word mandatum. That's the history and etymology of the word Maundy. Mandatum, for command, an order, a mandate, a commandment, right? From the word spoken by Jesus to his disciples after washing their feet at the Last Supper. And you can see in the slide, which verse that is, but I'm gonna highlight it in the next slide so we can look at it more closely. John 13, 34, 35, right? A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So in verse 34, Jesus gave the commandment, right? The mandatum. He gave the mandatum on Holy Thursday. On Monday, Thursday, he gave this commandment. That's why we call it Monday. He said, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. And you know how much Jesus loved us, right? He died for us. So that's a very high standard. He set the bar so high, right? This is how you should love. Of course, we don't necessarily literally have to die for someone. Sometimes we may have to, we sacrifice our life. But, in our little sacrifices, in the way we take care of our families, that's dying a little, right? So he gave this commandment in verse 34. And then in verse 35, I'm going to put it in a separate slide so we can look at it more closely again. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. I'm going to repeat that. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, that you are Christians, right? If you have love for one another. So in this one verse alone, in the whole Bible, Jesus himself answered the question, what does it mean to be a Christian? So if someone asks you, what does it mean to be a Christian? You can just say, John 13, 35. In one word, what does it mean to be a Christian? Love. Why? Because ubi caritas es vera, Deus EBS. Where there is love, God is there. Where there is love, God is there. My brothers and sisters in Christ, what does it mean to be a Christian? Faith, hope, and the greatest of all, love. I thank you, and may God be praised.